All civilians are vulnerable, but women and children are particularly at risk. Increasingly, women and children have been targeted, and peacekeeping missions need to be prepared to meet the very pressing challenge of violence against women and children.
Part of the changing face of war, or the changing nature of conflict, is the increasing use of sexual violence actually as a cheap, effective and silent tool of war, actually literally as a tactic of war. We've long seen sexual violence concomitant with conflict, but seen it as somehow just a byproduct of conflict or part of war's collateral damage. In fact, in contemporary conflicts, we know that sexual violence is used as a means to achieve military, political and economic ends.
It's more dangerous to be a woman than a soldier. They cannot say, well, we know that there are armed groups in the forest, so I'll stay home. They have to go out. They are the ones who fetch water and firewood and bring produce to the market and make sure that the children are taken care of. And this is often when they are attacked.
So, for example, peacekeepers have to think on which are the ways, and maybe non-traditional ways of patrolling.
Some of these include the firewood patrols, which have reduced the incidence of rape. Some of these include market escorts tailored to women's mobility patterns, so women can safely get to market and undertake trade, which then supports economic recovery in the post-conflict phase.
You cannot not only patrol main roads, you have to go maybe to smaller. You have to think on well-lit latrines or showers in the camps.
One interesting practice that I actually heard about first when I went to Rwanda and talked to the Rwandan Defence Force. Some of these Rwandan soldiers told me we saw mass rape during the genocide in 1994 in our country. So when we are in Darfur, we look upon those women and girls as our own sisters, mothers and aunties, and we do for them as we would want to do for the women in our own country. So they worked with the women in the camps to build these fuel-efficient stoves, which used less fuel and enabled women to actually have to venture out of the camp less at great personal risk, and to be able to still cook the same amount of food.
Sometimes people forget because they're thinking about the services that people need. People need food, they need water, they need sanitation, and they forget that there are big issues for people in terms of the violence that they have encountered, the abuse that they've encountered, all of which has a huge impact on them psychologically.
We must recognize that this is a very sensitive area, that women may not want to speak about that. They may feel shamed by that, and we have to be sensitive to these concerns and recognize that our approaches must change. So, for example, bringing far more women into peacekeeping in some fashion or another is absolutely critical when we deal with the protection issues.
I remember I visited a little hamlet where the night before 47 women and girls were gang raped and locked up in their huts and burned alive. And the perpetrators fled, and then the men came back to the village and told us, we know where they are. We know where they're hiding in the bush. So what are you going to do?
Today it is an internationally recognized crime, and this is how we have to fight it. It is not cultural, it is not even sexual, it is criminal.
There's no question that the protection of civilians, and in particular, I would argue children, is crucial to ensuring that we have a secure future. And let's just take the example of child soldiers, where you have a 10 or a 12 or a 14-year-old who's been enslaved in an army camp, reintegrating them into a community that, one, may not want them back, two, they may never have been integrated to begin with, and three, they may no longer be a child. One of the things that young people themselves have told us, who have formed a group of former child soldiers, is they want to be trained for lucrative livelihood that will prevent them from ever being recruited back into armed forces again. We have international legal frameworks that govern this work. We have the Convention on the Rights of the Child, we have Geneva Conventions, we have Paris Principles, we have the optional protocol on the sale of children, and we have resolutions of the Security Council. So we've moved a long way in the last, I would say, 7 years. We know what's right and wrong. Actors know what is right and wrong in these contexts. It's not an optional part of our work, in our opinion. It's really one that we are morally and normatively responsible for.